Today we're going to be creating a sales jig for marketing a new industrial robot arm. So to start off with, I'm going to be bringing in a new 3D model. So I'm going to the Add Content menu, and then I'm going to import my own CAD file. Now, in order to navigate myself around this space, I'm going to be using our mouse controls. By pressing and holding the right mouse button, I can rotate myself. If I hold down the space bar and press and hold the left mouse button, I can pan myself and zoom in and zoom out. It's done using our scroll wheel. Now we have our 3D model loaded in. Because we used an FBX file, it did contain some colors, so those have automatically been applied to our 3D model. But I may want to edit these further to make them look a bit more realistic. Now, in order to do this, I could go to the Appearance menu, and in our Materials library, we have a range of different effects we could use. But in this case, I'm going to customize our standard material, which is already applied. So if you go to the top right-hand corner and open up the Object Properties panel, you'll have access to some of our more advanced features. So if I scroll down, inside of our Materials menu, we have Advanced Settings, and down the bottom, we have access to the roughness and metalness controls. So what I'm going to do is lower the roughness of our object, count to 1, and I'll increase the metalness to 1.5, and that's going to apply a bit more of a realistic metal sheen to our model. Now, if I want to edit individual components, I could press Tab, or I can press this button at the top of our toolbar, and by clicking on these individual components, I'm able to edit those. Now, if I want to edit multiple sub-objects at the same time, I just need to press and hold down Shift and click to select the objects I want to edit. This allows me to add to my selection. Now, if I want to remove from my selection, just keep holding Shift and click again, but I'm happy with these as they are. And what I'd like to do is swap from an industrial orange to a clean modern white. So I'm going to edit the color. I'm also going to affect the roughness and metalness. And as well as being able to customize that standard material, you can also select materials from this material menu. In this case, I'm going to apply a chrome to this. I can then choose to edit the color as well. But I'm pretty happy with things as they are now. So once you're done editing your 3D model, it's worth noting that we are also able to reposition that model within the scene. To start off with, because I want this first step in my timeline to act as an introductory step, I'm going to be positioning this 3D model into a very neutral beginning pose. So we do have parenting applied to the objects. And in order to get a better look at this, you can go to the object list. And if you look at the robot arm, you can see we have objects nested within each other. This is what allows us to edit a sequence of models while only adjusting that root object. So in order for me to pose my model, I'm going to swap into the Rotate tool. Then I can click and drag on these controls in order to pose my model. So at this point, we have this in a neutral pose. And it's worth noting, if I select my object in object mode, and I move this back, you can see that on the floor we have an arrow here. This gives you an idea of the direction people are going to be viewing your jig when they first open it up in augmented reality. So with our object posed, what I'm going to do next is bring in a title card. So I'm going to do this by opening up our Add Content menu and bringing in an image card. Now this image is significantly smaller than the 3D model we have in our scene. So to quickly realign your current view, you just need to double click on the background. And that's going to reposition you so that you're viewing the center point of that world. Now I also recommend getting a side view and then pressing the space bar, click and drag with the left mouse control just to grab yourself and sort of pull that camera aside. Now we do want to select the object that we've just loaded into our scene. If I go to our object list and close this drop-down menu, you can see that the newest object in your scene will always be at the bottom of that menu. So that makes it quite simple for you to select from this object list. Now this image card works like any other 3D object in your scene. You'll be controlling it using the Jig toolbar, and I'm going to be scaling this up. So we've got a nice big title card sitting alongside that robotic arm. And it's worth noting that this image card is a .png image, so it does also support transparency. So if I go to my appearance tool and slightly pull down on this transparency slider, that turns on that transparency, and you can see we actually have rounded corners. We have a semi-transparent background and fully opaque letters. So if you're at a trade show and you have people walking by, it makes it very simple and easy for you to pass that text against that backing card. So what I would do next on this step is add in some intro text. As well as being able to add in text into this text box, which is going to be appearing alongside your 3D model, you can also choose to record this audio. If I click on this button, my audio is currently being recorded, and that's going to be uploaded directly into the Jig. But as well as being able to record and upload your own audio, you can choose to import non-native audio files using our Upload Audio button. And this can be particularly useful when you're using text-to-speech tools in order to generate that audio. So what I'm going to do next is add another step into my Jig. I just need to go to the top at our timeline and add a new step. And what I'm going to do next is begin animating some of the elements within my Jig itself. Now to start off, I'm going to pull this title card back, and I'm also going to make it transparent. This will create a smooth transitional effect from step 1 to step 2, where that fades out and we can begin discussing the robotic arm. So what I'm going to do next is repose this robot arm as though it's woken up and it's ready for work. There we go. So now when we go from step 1 to step 2, we have that smooth transition where that robot arm is waking up. What I'm going to do next is bring in our product spec sheet so that we can go into some of the details of our 3D model. Now it is worth noting this image is a PNG as well, so in order for me to turn on that transparency, once again I'm just dragging on that transparency slider. And this spec sheet is going to provide potential customers points of difference to compare when looking at our products. So I could choose to add in some further information around these different data points. One in particular that I'd like to show off is the maximum reach of our robot. So what I'm going to do is add another step into my Jig, and on this step I'm going to be displaying this maximum reach. So moving our data sheet back, I'll make it transparent just like I did with the transition for the title card. What I'm going to do next is pose our robot arm so that we get its maximum reach distance. And with this reach distance reached, I'm then going to bring in a ruler object to highlight this diameter. So again, I'm going to our Add Content menu and I'll import a 3D file. In this case, it's the degree ruler. Now, because we have multiple steps on our timeline, we're being asked if we'd like to load this object on multiple steps in our Jig. Now, generally, I recommend just sticking with all steps, so I'm going to import that on all steps. So you can see that the ruler is slightly smaller than I'd like. So what I'm going to do is scale up this model. But if I choose to scale it up, it is going to scale at the center point of that pivot. So you can see it's just going to clip or go beneath that floor. So one way I can go about designing this so that it always scales up from the correct point is I can go to our Object Properties panel, and here we have access to change our pivot point. And if I choose to drag this down and just put this at the center point of the world, I can save this. And now when I scale it up, it's going to be scaling from that point. So I'm just going to position this so we get it right at the edge of our 3D model. I do also want to edit its material, so I'm going to jump in and select the X-ray material. I'll make this a bit of a darker blue. This is just going to gently catch the light and show off our 3D model as well. Now it is worth noting, because I've brought this 3D model in on all steps of my jig, when I go to step 2, it's going to be repositioning itself back to its initial position. You can also see that it's currently descended slightly below that floor. So in order for me to animate this across all steps, what I'm going to do is go back to step 3. I'll then select my 3D model, and what I'm going to do is copy some of its properties from one step to another. So in order for me to do this, I'm going to press and hold on any of the tools inside of our toolbar. For example, I'm pressing and holding on the position tool, and that's opened up our replicate menu. You can see we also get this little pop-up asking whether we want to replicate any attributes. In this case, I want to copy the top 4, its position, its rotation, its scale, and its colors and materials. And I'm going to copy those to all of our previous steps. So now when I go to step 2 and step 1, that's always going to be visible. So on step 3, I'm happy where it is. And on step 2, I'm going to scale down our 3D model. And I'm going to make it transparent. And what I'm going to do next is copy both that transparency change and that scale change. And I'm going to copy those to the previous step. So now when I go from step 1, I start off with this industrial robot. Step 2, I have that design sheet popping up. And step 3, I have our object's degrees of rotation and overall reach showing. So what I'm going to do next is apply some slow rotation to our model. So if I zoom in and select this model here in sub-object mode, I'm then going to apply some rotation. I'll jump into my spin tool and turn on spin. I do need to make sure that I select the correct axes. In this case, it's the y-axis. And I want this to be a slow rotation. So I'm going to slow this down, something like 15 degrees. It's fast enough that we're getting that full range of motion shown, but it's also slow enough that it isn't going to be a shock to people when they're viewing it. I can add some further rotation by selecting some of these objects here. This is going a bit fast as well, so I might set this to something like 30. Now you can see when I click off my object, it isn't spinning. This is so that we're able to easily work in our workshop, but it is still present in the scene. And to test this out, you just need to go to the preview mode and view that object here. So you can see we've got that range of motion and we have the rotation happening. Now another thing I may want to do is add in some information on degrees of rotation. And then what I'm going to do is jump back to our previous step, and I'm going to add some interactivity to this menu card itself. In order for me to do this, I'm going to add in a selectable object. So I'll go to our content menu and I'll jump into our 3D model library. Here we have 3 objects, and I'll select a cube from our shapes and symbols. And again, I'm going to load this in on all steps. And in order for me to make this selectable, I'm going to be positioning this cube so it's sitting over this word as though it's a hitbox within a game. So I'll scale up my object. So you can see it's fully covering our object now. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'll make it transparent. Now it is still selectable within our scene, even though it's hidden. I'm then going to apply an action to our object. And what actions do is they allow you to turn a normal 3D object into an interactive button or element within the jig itself. In this case, I'm going to apply an action that allows me to direct users from our current step on step 2 to step 3. So selecting an action, I'm going to direct the user to that step, type in the step I want, and I'll add that action in. So now when people click on one of these menu items, they'll be able to jump themselves straight to step 3. Now I do need to work on that transition. You can see that cube went down and repositioned itself. So in order to do this, I'm going to press and hold our appearance, our scale, and our position tool. And I'm going to copy them on all steps from step 1 and step 3. So now it's going to be in the same position here. And here I'm just going to shrink it down. If I ever need help selecting my object, I can go to the object list and select cube. And I could also choose to copy the current scale from step 1 to step 3. In order to do that, I just need to press and hold, and I can choose to copy that attribute and paste that on step 3. So now on step 1, we have our industrial robotics, we have our introductory text. On step 2, we've got our design spec sheet, and I could choose to add in a number of different actionable objects on this step to take me to different steps of my jig that go into each of these different menu items. In this case, I've just set up one, so I'm going to select my maximum reach. And in order to activate this inside of the workshop, you just need to press and hold Alt when clicking on it. And that's going to direct me to step 3. Where we're able to see the current rotation of our object as well as the level of reach it has. So once I'm happy with the overall jig, I'm then going to save this out. So I'm going to save my 3D model. I'm then going to jump into my main menu. You can see that the title of this jig has automatically been filled in, but I'm going to edit this. I then have the option to add in a further description about what we're going to go into with regards to this presentation. And I can also choose to edit our thumbnail image. Now, rather than this step, I may want to go to the step where we have our title card being shown, and I'll get a nice thumbnail image of our 3D model. I tend to recommend selecting a contrasting color. You can see that the white of the robot and the callout card isn't showing off well. So I may choose something like this blue here, and I'll take that image thumbnail. If I jump into our jig information panel, you can see that that's been updated. So what I'm going to do next is share this jig with potential customers and clients, as well as my colleagues. To do this, I'm going to jump into our share menu. Here we can generate a shareable jig link. You can see that this link is automatically made, and I can just copy and paste this in order to share it in an email or in any other marketing materials we might have. I can also choose to share this with my team internally. This will mean that only members of your company are able to view and access this jig inside of your company account. And if I turn on resharing, that will allow them to generate their own shareable jig links. And as well as being able to create these links, we can also generate QR codes. Now, this can be great to add to marketing pamphlets as well as any posters you have at a trade show booth. And I can choose to embed this inside of a website. So if I copy this embed code, I can paste this inside of our website's HTML codebase, and this can be a great way of embedding the jig inside of the website itself.